What is up, guys? Welcome back to another GeekaWhat video. In this one, I'm going to be showing you how to build an awesome $900 gaming PC build for 2022. I'll be running through all the components that make this system possible, how to assemble it step by step from start right through to finish, and looking at performance a little bit later. This build is also well future-proofed against any new hardware releases, which I'll talk in more detail about. But without any further ado, let's go right ahead and get this system built. Now, as with all of my builds recently, I've been starting off with the CPU and GPU. They're the two most important components in a gaming PC, and it can't hurt to cut right to the chase, as long as you guys don't fast forward through the rest of the video. Now, here we've got the AMD RX 6650 XT and a Ryzen 5 5600X. The 5600X is a top-tier gaming CPU with boost clocks of over 4 GHz. It's got good single-threaded performance, while 6 cores and 12 threads also make it fantastic for a bit of multi-threaded. We're talking streaming, bit of editing, and productivity on the side. The 6650 XT is one of AMD's latest RDNA 2 cards, and is perhaps unlikely to be replaced by new hardware, as it itself is actually pretty new still. It only released earlier in the year. With 8GB of video memory on the PCI Generation 4 platform, it's a powerful card that performs well for 1080 and a bit of 1440p gaming. I'll be taking a detailed look at benchmarks later, but you can expect over 250 frames per second in Fortnite at 1080p competitive settings, more than 100 FPS in Battlefield 2042, and over 170 in Apex Legends, which makes this card a really great bet. AMD's 6600 lineup of GPUs have become a favourite amongst gamers around this price point because they do provide exceptional value for money. You also get access to AMD's Adrenalin software with this GPU, allowing you to tweak all of your game settings based on the data from hundreds of thousands of other Radeon users, and you can also launch all of your games from a single place. Being able to optimise your titles to get the best settings and the best frame rates without having to spend half an hour turning that setting on and testing the frame rate and changing that setting and finding out why your game is not quite at the level you want, it takes the hard work out of it, making your life a bit easier, and you can just dive in and get gaming. It also lets you record and stream your gameplay, which is pretty cool, using the built-in encoders and decoders on the GPUs, meaning you haven't necessarily got to have a really powerful CPU to actually record and share your gameplay, whether that's on Twitch or YouTube or just for your own bragging rights at the end of the week when you've 360 no-scoped in Battlefield 2042. Now, with this being an AMD build, one of the massive advantages we do have is access to affordable motherboards, and that's where this ASUS Tough Gaming B550M plus Wi-Fi comes in. Now, motherboards at the moment seem to have just gone really expensive, and for those of you looking to build a system at this level, that's a bit of a problem. Spending $200, $300 or $400 on a board isn't really conducive with getting a great value PC. With built-in Wi-Fi, support for Ryzen 5000 and 3000 CPUs, as well as PCI Gen 4 support for latest graphics card bandwidth and super fast SSDs, it just ticks a lot of boxes. One thing that builders often overlook at all levels is Wi-Fi. You can get an add-in Wi-Fi card which plugs into spare PCIe slots, but it's much easier and often cheaper to just have it integrated directly into the board from day one. If we take a look at the board, the first thing we can then go ahead and do is just pop the CPU into the socket. Our 5600X chip is going to seat in nice and easily by pulling up the arm, dropping it into place nice and gently, no pressure or force is required. There we are. It took a bit of an effort. It scared me for a moment then, and then we can pop the arm back down. This is what they call their zero insertion force sockets. You haven't got to apply any pressure or force to get the arm down. While we're here, I'll also be adding in our RAM. This is a Corsair Vengeance RGB RS kit with an RGB heat spreader up top and these really nice Vengeance metal designs on either side. It's a really great option. It's also Intel XMP and Ryzen ready in terms of memory speeds, allowing you to jump into your XMP profiles and tune them up to 3600 MHz in line with the RAM itself. We're going to pull back the clips on the grey slots on this board and line the notch on the RAM DIMM. That's this one just here with the notch on the motherboard. Just this one here. We can slide the memory into place, apply a bit of pressure with either thumb and click it in nice and easily. Repeat for as many RAM DIMMs as you've got. We've got 2, leaving us 2 spare slots for future upgrades. I can't get this one in. Why won't it go in? There we are. Lovely stuff. Now, there is another part to go before we install the cooler, which is the final component on the motherboard assembly, and that is the storage. I've got a bit spenny. I've got a bit out there. Some people might think it's overkill. I think it's beautiful. The XPG Spectrix S20G. It isn't the cheapest M.2 drive out there, but to be fair, it's a lot cheaper than some Gen 4 designs and does give us some pretty good speeds. Plus, it's gonna look absolutely sick in our build today. Now, the M.2 SSD is the only part of the build where your normal screwdriver isn't gonna cut the mustard. In fact, we need to locate a much smaller one. I have found one. You need one of these. Not specifically this model, but a teeny tiny screwdriver with a small Phillips nib on the end to allow you to remove the M.2 standoff on your motherboard. Take these screw out and you'll see here it really is very small, so be careful not to lose this. Trust me, finding one of these in a carpet is no easy task. We can then add our drive into place like so, push it down and add the screw back in to make sure it's not going to go anywhere. This drive can be customized as well with ASUS or a sync to match up with the RGB on some of our other components, making your life that little bit easier. Nice. Right then, so the next stage of proceedings is installing the cooler. I've gone ahead and prepped our Cooler Master Hyper 212 RGB Black Edition for this build. It's a budget air tower cooler that's going to do a great job of keeping the CPU cool and even give us some overclocking headroom. Remember, you can overclock on the B550 chipset, making our life a bit of a doddle really. If we take the cooler itself, we also need to grab these longer of the brackets. These longer brackets compared to the Intel ones are going to fasten the cooler to the motherboard. Before that though, we need to also grab our backplate, which should look a little something like this, with posts sticking out on the side that says Intel. The AMD scaffolding side should be at the rear, as well as finally these female to female posts. These female to female posts are what we're going to use to secure the cooler into place. It can be a bit complicated, but let me guide you through it. First, add the long brackets onto the bottom of our 212 RGB Black Edition. Once the long brackets have been added onto the bottom of the 212, we're then going to add the backplate through the rear of the motherboard. The female to female posts are then going to go on top, before finally adding a drop of thermal paste and securing the cooler down. Backplate, brackets, female to female posts, a bit of thermal paste, and you're good to go. Simple, right? Sort of. Coolers are always complicated, so just take it slow and don't rush this stage of the process. The bottom of the cooler needs to make good contact with the top of our Ryzen processor. Right then, with the motherboard assembly complete, we can go ahead and pop it into the case. For a build like this, you don't want to break the bank, but you also want something with a nice feature set that also is easy to build in and provides great airflow. Introducing, not this, that's the power supply for later, but this, the Cooler Master, what's it called? I forgot what it's called. Introducing this, the Cooler Master CMP 520. Now, I'll keep it brief. The best things about this case are the USB 3 on the front panel, the octagonal mesh on the front, or polygon mesh I should say, and really great support for up to full-size ATX motherboards. If you've watched a build on the channel before, you'll know what we're going to do next. We're going to take all the side panels off our case. You may need to use a screwdriver, as the thumb screws can be a little bit tight. We're then going to pick the motherboard up and locate each of the standoff holes through the board itself. You'll see there's 3 at the top, we've got 3 along the middle, and then 2 down the bottom, but they're at slightly different heights. These need to correspond with the standoffs in the case. That's the posts here, 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 and around. The 3 at the top look a-okay, 3 down the middle look equally okay to me. 3 on the bottom we won't be using as they're below the motherboard, but we do need 1 here and 1 here. So grab yourself a standoff tool, go ahead and take these out and screw them into the motherboard tray. Nice and simple. Nicely done. We can now go ahead and pop in the GPU I talked about earlier. AMD's 6600 lineup is really, really strong, from the non-XT to the new 6650 XT. Going for a card like this, it's important to pick up a good cooler, but also a cooler that's not too over the top. With it being quite a power efficient card, you don't need loads of cooling and the cost that comes with it. And this ASUS dual design is literally perfect for what we're after. If you pull the case in, we're going to actually hover the GPU over the top PCIe slot. We're going to do this to make sure that the PCIe lane covers, that's these things at the back here, are removed in the right places. Because I've used this case before, they are, and they're single use, meaning I couldn't put them back on for the sake of the video. We can then go ahead and line up the graphics card, apply a bit of pressure, and it will click into place nice and easily. Secure it down with a couple of screws to stop this from happening, and we'll be wiring it up in the final stage of the build, which is of course the power supply. To provide power to our whole system today, I've picked up the Corsair CX650F. This is an RGB fully modular power supply that I must have used like 20 times on the channel for a simple reason that it's cheap, it's cheerful, and it provides the levels of performance that we need. 650 watts is going to be perfect for our build. Remember, you're not getting quite that because of efficiency. You're potentially losing up to 15% of your power output as heat or noise while the power supply converts the energy from the wall into usable voltages and connections for all of your components. In terms of which cables you'll definitely need a motherboard power connector. That looks a little something like this. You'll also definitely need a 6+2 pin PCIe power. That looks like this and may have 2 harnesses on, though we're only going to use 1, which is completely fine. You'll also need a 4+4 pin CPU power connection. You can tell because it's stuck together with a little clip, which you can actually undo. SATA power is next up. These are the thin cables powering hard drives, SSDs, and any of our RGB hubs in this build. And I think that's basically it. All these extra cables are not going to go to waste, as they'll be useful in the event that you upgrade your PC later. That could be anything from a more powerful GPU, a different motherboard. You could go ahead and add in loads more RGB fans and strips, and those cables will come in handy. You never know what parts you might change, so keep this safe on a nice shelf or a cupboard. And that way, you're never gonna lose it. Let's go ahead, pop those cables into the power supply, screw that into the rear of the case, and plug up our CPU to the top left, motherboard to the far right, and GPU to the graphics card to make sure the whole build has plenty of power to get going. And with the power supply cables in, all that's left to do is boot the system up and check out how it performs. We'll be testing a wide range of titles, starting with Battlefield 2042 and working through to the likes of Apex and Fortnite. In Battlefield 2042, we first tested at 1080p high settings to get a baseline result. Here we got 106 FPS on average with our 6650 XT, a result that in of itself we were very pleased with. But we did wonder what might happen if we tested out AMD's Super Resolution tech to push the gameplay resolution up to 4K without sacrificing too much frame rate. Well, here with our render resolution at 1080 using AMD's Fidelity FX resolution scaler to upscale to 4K, we got 94 FPS on average. This is only around 10% less than we got at native 1080p, but of course gives us around 4 times the resolution that we would have typically achieved. In the likes of F1 2022, our result mileage was very similar too. Here we tested with a few different settings, once again starting off at what I'd call 1080p vanilla, ultra high settings, no resolution scalers, to see what sort of baseline numbers we could get. We pulled in 157 FPS on average with strong 90 and 99th percentile results, and as usual tested with the in-game benchmark mode, allowing you guys to replicate these sort of results for yourself and see how yours stacks up. We then next went to enable AMD's Fidelity FX resolution scaler, starting off at the ultra performance preset. This will make the scaling more aggressive in order to achieve the highest frame rate possible. It did work as well. We got over 200 frames per second on average, giving us around 55 FPS more than with the resolution scaler disabled. But I did wonder if we cranked the preset for the scaler up to quality to give us a slightly better visual fidelity output and slightly less frame rate, how much would we still gain over having the setting disabled completely? I'm glad to report that we gained a good amount, lying in the middle of our performance preset and our vanilla tests with 185 FPS, so 17 frames per second lower than with Fidelity FX on performance, but still a good chunk higher than without the setting enabled in the first place. These resolution scalers nowadays are so good and give you plenty of options to supercharge your frame rate to the next level. In Spider-Man we tested at 1080p high. Here we achieved 104 FPS. No scalers to talk about here, but the game did perform very well and looked, in my opinion, absolutely fantastic. We also tested out Apex Legends. Apex is a game that traditionally performs very well on AMD hardware, and at 1080p high, we were impressed with the results. We got 179 FPS on average, with 163 and 150 for the 90 and 99th percentiles. While testing at 1080p upscaled through to 4K, we achieved just slightly less, 148 FPS on average. As I say, for those of you with high-res monitors, 1440p or 4K panels, this could be the perfect option to get those amazing frame rates. We also tested Valorant. It's an oldie but a goldie and a great one to actually try out in terms of straight rasterization performance. 1080p high, we got 444 frames per second, with 349 and 193 for the 90 and 99th percentile results. As always, our frame rates were captured with MSI Afterburner's Reaver Tuner. Finally, to wrap things up, in Fortnite, we got 186 FPS at 1080p competitive settings on average, average, with highs that did exceed at times 250. This is where you tune everything to low except the render distance, which you set to far for the maximum frame rate, maximum view distance, and maximum competitive advantage. And with that, that pretty much wraps it up. If you enjoyed this one, make sure to get subscribed. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.